to let him go.
But
As your maker, I command you.
Have you guys ever wondered about the vampire prodigy connection? Of course, we've seen many variations of it, including the loving father-daughter relationship between Bill and Jessica on HBO's hit series True Blood. And then we've seen the loving and intimate relationship between Eric and Pam. And then, of course, the later dysfunctional and traumatic relationship between Louis and Lestat on AMC's Interview with a Vampire. Now, everyone talks about trauma bonds and how they work in relationships and how we can sometimes fall prey to manipulation and mistreatment when falling in love. However, no one goes over the inner workings of why we choose the wrong partners and how we can start to break away from them. This is a topic that will be discussed in this video, so stay tuned. So what is trauma bonding in a narcissistic relationship? Well, according to the experts, the trauma bond happens when an abuser uses manipulation tactics and techniques and cycles of abuse to make their victims feel small and dependent. And we've all heard it before, blah, 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 snore. What people don't tell you is that trauma bonds are incredibly insidious. They're insidious because they work mostly on a subconscious level. Yes, there are a lot of inner workings and suppressed feelings and desires that cause you to want to be with that bad boy, or that cause you to want to be with somebody who really isn't good for you. In fact, that's really what attraction is. Yes, superficially, we're attracted to the pretty faces, yet under the surface, we're looking for that special someone to satisfy all of our desires and our suppressed needs. We're looking for someone to make us feel whole and validated. But here's the trick. The more we bury our emotions, or the longer we go without getting our needs met, the likelihood of us being attracted to the wrong person, or worse, a toxic person, increases. Let's take a look at Interview with a Vampire, the movie, where Louis was suffering from grief, and thus he attracted the infamous Lestat. In the series, it was Louis who was very uncomfortable with his sexuality, never really acting out on it, out of fear of judgment and of course shame. This allowed Lestat to seduce him. In fact, we tend to get into toxic relationships when we are at our weakest points. In many of these cases, we align with people and bond based on mutual trauma and pain. The relationship doesn't have the legs or the foundation to grow. As a result, both people in the relationship devolve as opposed to evolve. This is the primary difference between trauma bonds and authentic love. Authentic love sprouts growth externally and internally, where both people in the relationship are free to express their feelings, their desires, and their fears. In trauma bonds, one partner has to lose themselves in the relationship entirely, denying their own feelings, their own pain, their own needs, their own suffering. In a trauma bond, one partner lives solely to satisfy the other. They have to walk on eggshells, tiptoe around the narcissist's ego, all in a weak effort to maintain the peace and quiet in the relationship. We have to understand that shared trauma is the glue that holds the toxic relationship together. Now, the first thing I need you to understand is that trauma rewires the brain and changes the entire DNA makeup of the abused individual. Now, people wonder, how can someone sustain abuse for long periods of time or suffer through a breakup, walk away from the abuser, only to get back with them again? The answer is simple. The trauma and the pain cause them to be emotionally unregulated. What does this mean? It means that the neurons in the brain of the abused fire differently than the neurons that are being fired in people who are used to having healthy, loving, happy relationships. Let me give you an example so you understand this concept a bit better. Let's just say you're hungry. Everywhere you go, people are only offering you meager scraps of food, just enough to keep you satiated. Yet your tummy is rumbling, and you would love to dig in some steak, and some potatoes and some mashed potatoes and some green beans, and you want some cookies for dessert. But no one gives you potatoes. No one gives you cookies. No one gives you steak. They just give you dry, crusty bread. Then someone comes along and says, yeah, I'll give you some steak and some potatoes. I can give you all the steak and potatoes you can possibly need, want, and eat, so long as you agree to my demands. So you give in because you're hungry. You're starving, in fact, and you have yet to get a better offer. Yet the food comes with conditions that you will be eternally abused and mistreated and shamed and ridiculed. Yet you accept these terms because your desire to eat outweighs the mistreatment and the abuse that you have to withstand. Then the cycles of abuse continues, of you being rewarded some steak and potatoes with repeated episodes of mistreatment, neglect, and abuse. In Louis's case, he was finally able to let his hair down and have an intimate connection with someone. Let's be real here. The chemistry between Lestat and Louis was amazing. I'm talking about the series on AMSC, the Interview with the Vampire series on AMSC. And I don't know about you, but I was rooting for this romance. I truly wanted it to work. And secretly, I still do. I still want these two to get back together again. However, upon closer observation, I can understand why the writers decided to turn this romance story into a sour one. We had to understand how Louis became a vampire, but more importantly, we needed to understand how he was able to survive the vampire Lestat. From watching the series, we can clearly see that Claudia saved Louis. She was the one who was able to rewire those neurons in his brain and finally get him to walk away from Lestat, his abuser. In short, it was Claudia who gave Louis these huge portions of steak and potatoes that he was so longing for. However, we can plainly see that Louis is a narrator that really can't be fully trusted. After all, he has been caught in a few lies throughout the season. What we do know is that despite everything that he has endured, he was finally able to break free from his toxic bond with the vampire Lestat. In fact, it seems as if he is now in a new loving and healthy relationship with Armand. And this relationship seems as if it's authentic and based on true love, where Louis can freely express himself, get all of his needs met, without the abuse and the alternative agendas that he had to submit to while being with Lestat.